The Regent's Reign, Chapter 5, A Strange Rumor. Yule went by without an issue. The celebration was a bit smaller than usual. Arthur had decided it was best to hold off inviting any nobles to the castle until his father improved. He was lucky that the weather made for a good cover-up, since the amount of snow they'd received since Merlin's birthday kept most of Camelot huddled by their hearths. Knowing that Merlin's room was drafty, Arthur gifted her a large down blanket for Yule. Another month passed. Winter eased up a bit, though there was still snowfalls and it remained quite cold. Arthur fell into something of a routine. Mornings were given over to paperwork and council meetings. He liked the paperwork better because, with a few pilfered sausages or a honey cake from his breakfast tray, Merlin would agree to stay and help him. She was a godsend, and he knew he wouldn't have gotten through half of the stack on his desk without her. She pointed out things he'd never thought of, even catching one of the older council members, Sedgwick, skimming funds from the royal taxes by changing a few numbers here and there and pocketing the difference. None of the rest of the council knew it was Merlin who'd caught that bit of treason, but Sedgwick was carted off to the dungeons, his household absorbed into the servants of Camelot, and his coffers used to shore up the lower town against the winter chill. They also added quite a bit of gold to the treasury, even with the raise Arthur put on the books for Merlin. Sedgwick had been at this for a while, according to the records, and the amount of gold the guards had found in his small fort not far from Camelot. Arthur's afternoons were set for training. He was working his nights harder than usual. He knew that. Part of it was a need to work through some frustration at his situation. Another part was they needed to be better. If someone else came for Camelot, he could not place faith in a single person, or even the two that had saved them from the immortal army. He needed to be able to trust people, the people he was supposed to rely on. Merlin had taught him that over and over again. But he had realized just how wrong his father had been about needing people. Uther's stance had always been that a king needed no one, but everyone needed the king. Late afternoon and early evenings were for audiences with nobles and peasants. That was when a trader from Mercia came forward. "Sire, I thought it best to bring this to your attention as soon as possible. I was passing through the foothills outside Greenwood and spotted something quite odd. There's a grove about a league outside the village. As I'm sure you've been made aware, the snow there has been very thick. But this grove was green as though in the full of summer sun. I did not dare approach further, but there was an opening in one of the hills that looked to be glowing," the man said, bowing, both as he began and as he ended. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention," Arthur said, nodding to the man who bowed again. He left, and Arthur turned to Gaius. "Can you tell us anything about this?" he asked. "Not without seeing it myself or hearing further report of it. Travel in the winter is hard on my old bones, but Merlin can give a report on what is found at this place. Little enough rumor has ever passed about the mountains of Andor. The foothills belong to them. The most dangerous thing there are the rare wildren that wander out of the tunnels." Gaius explained. Arthur nodded, suppressing a shudder at the mention of wildren. Merlin had pulled a face at the name of the creature as well, and that made Arthur smile privately. He turned to Leon. "Pick 6 men. We ride at daybreak tomorrow. Pack warmly. It's a 2-day trek to the mountains," he said, directing that last to Merlin, who nodded. "Merlin, have someone else pack my things. If you're traveling at Gaius's behest, you need to pack for yourself," he said, and she nodded again and curtsied, leaving the hall with Leon. Arthur finished up the last few audiences. "Sire, do you think it's wise for you to leave?" Lord Lyle asked, the old man's voice quaking slightly. So he, at least, hadn't missed that Arthur would be accompanying the party. "If the council cannot watch over Camelot for 5 days while the Prince Regent sees to the safety of the kingdom, then perhaps we need a new council," Sir Galahad said, stepping up to Arthur's side. Arthur smiled, having been a moment away from saying something similar, though perhaps more tactfully. Galahad had a few new scars. As one of the youngest knights of Camelot, he had been tortured to attempt to force cooperation from the others during Morgaux's and Morgana's reign. He had a scar now that ran from his left temple down through his left eyebrow. He'd been lucky not to lose the eye altogether. Most of the knights had gained a whole new respect for the king's former squire, having survived magical and mundane torture. Many in Camelot had gained the same respect for the young man. He was mostly healed now, thanks to Merlin and Gaius. Galahad bowed to Arthur. Sir Leon says he's selected himself, Sirs Gawain, Elian, Lancelot, Percival, and Quentin, he said, listing off the whole round table and one of the newer men who had been knighted just 4 months before Morgana's coup. They have all been informed and are packing as we speak.
Good. It'll do us all some good to get out of the castle for a while,
Arthur said as Willis gathered up the prince's paperwork.
Sire, can we trust these new men? They will be looking after your safety, after all,
Lord Lyle quibbled.
Lord Lyle, if any of my new knights wanted me dead, all they would have had to do was nothing near 2 months ago. Now you would still be cowering under the rule of a sorceress and my sister,
Arthur pointed out before turning on his heel and leaving, taking only momentary pleasure at Lord Lyle's expression of shock and scandal. It was hardly a secret that Morgana was Arthur's half-sister anymore. She had announced it at her forced coronation, after all, in front of the whole court and most, if not all, of the serving staff. Arthur would not hide from this truth. Most of the problem, the cause of Morgana's pain and anger, had been their father lying to all of them her entire life. The magic... that was something else. Something Arthur wasn't sure he was ready to face up to yet. He sighed as he re-entered his room and found Merlin packing his bag.
Thought I told you to worry about your own things for this trip,
he said, his tone teasing as Merlin slipped an extra pair of gloves into his pack. Gaius said he would. You don't have a manservant anymore, remember? Not with George's promotion, though he did offer. You're stuck with me, she said, grinning.
No better place to be,
he said, pecking her on the cheek, smiling as he spotted the glint of gold under her scarf. She did not wear the necklace openly. It would be considered far too fine for someone of her station, but he had plans to change that. Sadly, it would take time. There were laws about this kind of thing, after all, and as much power as he held, he wasn't king yet. He hoped, for his father's sake, he wouldn't be for some time yet.